Have you ever had a Minecraft build where nothing looks wrong, but nothing looks right either? You start changing random things, adding details, removing blocks, and it somehow gets worse? That's not a building problem, that's a diagnosis problem. In this video, I'm going to show you the exact checklist I use when a build feels off so that you know what to fix, in what order, and without restarting the build. First things that I always check is proportions and scale, because if those are off, then your build will never feel right, no matter how much detail you add. Proportions are just the relationship between parts of the build, the wall height, the roof size, the window scale, and even the door size. When one of these is out of balance, the whole build feels awkward. The most common proportion mistakes that I see are walls being a little too tall or a little too short. For this build, I am trying to make a medieval house. So instead of rebuilding everything, I'm going to just raise the walls to about 5 blocks tall, and I'm going to elongate the roof. And then I'll stop. I don't decorate, I don't texture, I just look and make sure that the scale and proportions are closer to what I was envisioning. I'm still not super happy with the width, so I'm going to bring it out 1 more block. This is already starting to look more like the size of the house I'm envisioning. If you're unsure what feels wrong, start with proportions and try to use reference images to help you get the proportions and scales that you need. Once our proportions feel right, the next thing I check is shape and silhouette. If the shape you start with is boring, then your end build is going to feel boring as well. Most Minecraft builds fail here because the shape and silhouette is just a box, a rectangle with a roof. So I went ahead and I added this side structure on so that we could get a little more interesting in this build. You don't fix a boring build with detail, you fix it by changing the shape. You can add different types of shapes, like circles, face the rectangular parts of your build in different directions, and that single change can end you up with a much more interesting shape at the end. If a build feels flat or boring, check the shape and silhouette before anything else. Detail can't fix a bad outline. Once the shape works, the build becomes easier to read, and that's when I ask the next question: what color palette are we going to use? Once the shape feels right, we can move on to color. No texture yet, only color. Most builds feel off here for one of 2 main reasons. Either there are too many colors, or none of the colors contrast, and both make the build hard to read. I want you to notice how simple I kept the color. I asked myself one question: what are my 2 base tones? Base tones should contrast, light and dark. That contrast is what makes this shape readable, especially from a distance. I lightened the walls with calcite and I darkened the trim by switching it to spruce wood, creating more contrast overall. These are not magical blocks, they only look better because we've now added contrast into the build. Once the base tone works, then and only then I'll add an accent color. For this one, we're gonna go with a cyan, kind of bluish. I pick one accent and I use it sparingly. I'll use it on things like the door. You'll see it be used in a lot of my details later on steps. If everything is an accent, then nothing really is. Accent colors are there to guide your eyes. Whereas with this build, your eyes don't really know where to go. So for now, try keeping it simple: 2 base tones, that contrast, and 1 accent color. Once color is under control and the shape is readable, I will then start to look into depth and texture. Once color is working, the next thing I check is depth. You can see here that we have a very flat wall. There's no depth at all coming in. So the first thing I did was overhang the roof, and you can see that this adds some natural shadow and creates a little more realism in the build. This is where a lot of builds go wrong, because when something feels flat, people think adding texture alone can fix it, but creating depth in your build is just as important as creating texture. Depth is about pushing and pulling the wall. Even a single block of depth can create shadows, and you can see all the shadows we have on this build compared to the last one. Even the windows, we push in half a block, and then the roof we bring out a block. We will continue to add some depth in our detailing stage with trapdoors and other things, but these are the main things that can add depth to your build immediately. Now when we go to texture, we can create some small variations in the walls and the roof intentionally. So you'll see that I've done it in a lot of the places that there already is shadow. I would put the darker blocks and I can accentuate the shadow by doing that. I can make the roof look more weathered, but I don't want to go overboard texturing everything. I've textured some spots on the wood to make that look weathered as well. Texture should support the structure, and if it starts to become too much, your build will feel noisy and you should dial it back. If a wall feels flat, add depth. If it feels boring after that, then add texture. Once depth and texture are under control, that's when we can move on to the final stage of detailing our build. One of the last things I will check is detail, and this is where a lot of builds can go wrong. When something feels off, people will just start adding details to try and hide it. Buttons, trapdoors, and random blocks, but details don't fix bad decisions. Details are supposed to do one thing, and that's support the structure. They should explain the build and not distract from. Here's one test I will use. If I can't explain why a detail is there, then it doesn't belong, even if it looks cool. So I'll always ask myself, why is this here? I put these trapdoors and shelves here so that the column would look like a support column and get thicker at the bottom. These shelves are here as a trim decoration. I have a cute sign to indicate that this is my cabin. These shelves are acting as window shutters that can be opened. This chimney is filling the dead space in the roof that we had at our previous build. Empty space isn't a problem, but details with no purpose are. If your build starts to feel messy, then remove some of the details. If it feels boring, then check your shape, color, and depth first. Details come last for a reason. Those are my main checklist items and why I'm able to go from this all the way to this. I do have one more bonus tip for you guys, and that is to use reference images. I like to get my reference images from Pinterest, and a reference image will help you throughout every single stage. It will help you with scale and proportions. It will help you with shape. It will help you with color and texture, and it will even help you with details. So make sure you use a reference image. So if your Minecraft builds ever feel off, make sure you're getting the right proportions and shapes. Make sure you're getting 2 colored base tones that contrast. Add your depth and texture, and then at the end, and only at the end, do your detailing. And make sure every detail has a purpose. If you want to keep learning how to think about building and not just following steps, then that's what this channel is for. Thanks for watching.